This episode of The Matt Feret Show is brought to you by the Brickhouse Agency. Brickhouse is a boutique independent health insurance agency that focuses on finding the right Medicare coverage for folks across the country. Matt's wife, Nikki, is the heart behind Brickhouse. She's great at making confusing things clear and is passionate about helping people find a Medicare insurance policy that suits their individual needs. To schedule a free one-on-one appointment with Nikki or a member of her team, head on over to brickhouseagency.com or simply call 844-844-6565 and someone will help you schedule a phone call or a Zoom meeting. The consultation is free because the insurance companies pay Brickhouse, not you. There's never any pressure or obligation to enroll. Your clearer, simpler Medicare journey is just a call or click away. brickhouseagency.com. Not affiliated with or endorsed by the government or federal Medicare program. Contacting Brickhouse Agency, LLC will direct you to a licensed insurance agent.
Hello, everyone. This is Matt Feret, author of Prepare for Medicare and Prepare for Social Security Insiders Guidebooks and online course training series. Welcome to another episode of The Matt Feret Show, where I interview insiders and experts to help light a path to successful living in midlife, retirement, and beyond. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. I'm excited to be here.
Happy to have you here. So tell everybody what you do, how long you've been doing it, and how you help people.
Sure. So I am a relationship and sexuality expert, and I'm also the author of Not Tonight, Honey, Why Women Actually Don't Want Sex and What We Can Do About It. And I have been doing this for, I've been in the sexuality field for about 15 years. I'm a trained mental health and sex therapist. And then I switched over to being a life coach. And so I've kind of combined the two to help individuals and couples infuse creativity and passion and purpose back into their lives.
Okay. That's a very broad topic. So let's talk about relationships first.
Sure.
Obviously you got a couple of big key markers in life, right? You've got birth, you've got, markers in school, markers in career, you have relationships, you have marriage or not, and just partnering, or I guess solo. And then you got ages and stages, right? So then you've got marriages, you've got maybe kids, you've got jobs, and then, not to fast forward too quickly, but then death, right? I mean, the big life moments. Or I guess divorce may be in there as well. So talk to me about how those things progress over time, and maybe we'll just start with marriage or coupledom and relationships and how they evolve over time, or how you've seen them.
Yeah, so I predominantly work with individuals around midlife. And so right now what I see is a lot of couples who have been married for, 10, 15 years and are kind of at the point where they are not wanting to be married anymore. Like, nobody comes to me when their marriage is or their relationship is solid. Very rarely will I get those individuals who just want a little tweak. It's usually individuals who are our next call is the divorce lawyer. And so the midlife is typically a time where people start to reassess and they start to look at their relationship with themselves. They start to notice hey, I'm closer to death than I am to birth. And that starts to can cause some existential crisis in some individuals, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, where they start to really evaluate their relationship with themselves, their romantic relationships, their relationships with their loved ones. And that can be a tough thing to navigate for a lot of people.
And in midlife, I would imagine there are some common triggers. Are there some not so common ones as well, or things that people listening or observing in themselves or their spouses or partners, that they might relate to?
Yeah, in terms of triggers, I think usually around this time, a lot of, especially parents, are to the point where their kids are starting to get older and they're more independent, and the marriage is less functional in terms of what their purpose is. So the purpose was to create a family, to raise a family. Now they're almost complete with that. And so they're starting to reevaluate their that primary romantic relationship, that marriage. And so I think a trigger might be, kids hitting middle school, high school, graduating, empty nesting, and now they're really start to face like, oh, this is the partner I picked 20 years ago. Like, this is not really sure I really love this choice still. And so that can obviously cause some reflection and some issues.
Is it, well, I'll just ask a question, I guess.
Sure.
If it's silly, you can tell me. Is it normally the woman who does it, or the man in a heterosexual relationship? Who normally has that moment, or is it both?
So what I've been seeing now is a trend among women. So women in their 40s, mid 40s, early 50s, is they're really tired of settling. And so I think what happens in a relationship is, you find a partner that is stable and is a good provider, but then also, I grew up in a generation where women, almost all of my mom friends work. And so it's a double income household. And so women aren't as dependent on their, in heterosexual partnerships, they're not as dependent financially on their male partners. And so they have this independence. And as they have started to kind of complete the initial investment of that relationship of raising kids together, they're starting to see like, I'm not satisfied with our sexual relationship. There's not a whole lot of romantic effort on my partner's part. There's not a connection anymore. And so then they start to pull away, and I see more women filing for divorce and more women wanting to end a marriage because they're really fed up.
What I've heard the phrase, I actually heard it when I was really early into my marriage: you either grow together or you grow apart.
Yeah.
And I can certainly see how 15, 20-year time span of perhaps different careers, perhaps moves, perhaps children, that there's a lot of attention that could be focused on other things rather than the couple and growing together.
Sure.
Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. There are so many things competing for your attention. And if you are not intentional about your primary relationship, your romantic relationship, it will deteriorate.
So let's say I'm early in my marriage.
Okay.
How do I, as a part of a couple, how do I think about this? Let's say I've been married 5 years. How do I think about this in terms of what kind of, I guess, work isn't really the right phase since it's supposed to be romance and love, but how do I work on this so that we do continue to grow together?
Yeah, but I think that's actually like a misnomer, that relationships or romantic or love doesn't require work. I think that's kind of like, I'm not calling you silly, but I think that that's a silly idea, that it's no different than anything else. Like even a job that you love, you still have to put in work to it, right? You still have to approach it with intention, and you still need to learn. And so one of the things that I encourage couples to do is to always learn, to always be open-minded to learning more about your partner, to never assume that like, well, we've been together for 30 years and, like, this is just how they are. Like,
This is it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying this is it. Like, that's 30 years. He's not going to change. She's not going to change.
Exactly. There are so many people that do that. It's almost like, well, I bought the cow, I'm going to put her out to pasture. And I know that sounds like a terrible analogy, but I see so many relationships approached like that, where there's no effort put in. It's like, well, I mean, why would I need to like seduce him? Like, we're just going to have sex anyways. It's like, sure. Yep. Okay. But like, maybe we could make it a little bit more fun, or maybe we could put in the work, but people don't want to put in the work if they don't think that they're going to get a return on their investment. And so
that's more, I guess, clinical than I thought it was. And that's not the word, not clinical. I guess maybe you said, investment. I'm like, I flashed up like, E-Trade or something like that in my brain. It's an investment, huh?
Yes, relationships are an investment. I mean, all kinds, but especially a marriage. I mean, it's a merging of not just, two souls or hearts or whatever, but like 2 lives, 2 bank accounts, 2 incomes, 2 retirement plans, 2 sets of, families, values. So it is an investment. Even, dating relationships, casual, that's a different approach, but I think anything, even a friendship is an investment, right? You are investing your time, your energy. A lot of times when people hear that word investments, they automatically just go to money, but we're investing our health, we're investing our values, we're investing, our heart. Like there's so many more things than just money that we can invest.
How much is of, the 15, 20-year existential crisis, 40s, 50s, is about investment in the relationship and the love, and how much does it have to do with sex?
You mean like in terms of like dissatisfaction?
Yeah, I'd say satisfaction, intimacy, I don't know, 20 years of boredom, still excitement about your partner. What's like I don't know, maybe I should have asked it a different way. There's got to be a friendship, right? There's got to be
Sure.
I get along with you, and then there's got to be
Yes.
I'm paying attention to you, and you're paying attention to my needs and wants, and I do little things
Yeah.
for you, i.e. romance, courting, and then a very old antiquated word, but maybe not anymore. And then there's actually, right, the physical manifestation of quote unquote love, which is sex. Can you have one and not the other? Can you do you have to work on one before the other happens? Is there, guess what's the balance between the sex and the rest of the relationship? If the sex is horrible and you're not having it, but you're in love, or you're doing will it work? Or if in the other way, if it's a romantic, wonderful, beautiful, loving friendship, but the sex isn't satisfying or not there, do they have to work in tandem? What's that kind of relationship?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I want to unpack there. So the first is, yes, you can absolutely have love without sex, and you can have sex without love. And a lot of times we assume that both are present in a marriage. And right, because that's like what society tells you, and that's what you're just kind of Disney instills in you, although maybe not the sex part, but right, just like, yes, of course you will love your partner and desire your partner and want those things. And, most people expect it to fade over time and kind of like settle into a rut or routine or whatever. But I think, I've worked with couples who love each other, but are in a sexless marriage. And I've worked with couples who have phenomenal sex, as they describe it, but they don't really love each other. Like they're there in a marriage, they're in their relationship for different reasons. And so one of the things that I work with my clients is, I don't believe that there's a cookie cutter like relationship style or relationship model for everyone. So there are some couples and some families or relationships where it is going to look like the traditional model, right? We got married, we have love, we have sex occasionally, and we have this family. And that's what's most important, is we prioritize certain things. And I think that that's something that couples really need to be honest about, is like, what is my priority in this marriage? Is my priority to raise children? Is my priority to have a solid retirement plan? Is my priority to have a community so that as we age and our parents' age, that we have a community around us to support us? Is it to have really great like sex and to have lots of pleasure? Is it to explore? There's no right answer to that question. So I think what I would encourage your listeners to do, no matter where they're at in their stage of a relationship, or even if they're single and desiring a relationship, is, what is the goal that I have for a relationship? Or what is my current goal in my relationship? And that is okay to change. I think back to when my husband and I have been married for 18 years. We have 3 kids, and I remember when we first got married, you have kind of like an overarching goal, when you're in your 20s and, idealistic of what your marriage is and should be. And then depending on those, like you talked about in the beginning of the show, those start to change depending on those milestones. It's like, okay, well, traveling, the world with 3 little kids at home is probably unlikely right now. So that's not my priority. My priority is to survive and to potty train and to teach my kids to read and to, still keep this marriage together because I value my co-parent and I value my partner. And then as life changes and different things happen, the goal or the priority of that relationship will also change. What I see happen a lot is that people get kind of swept up and they allow life to dictate what those priorities are instead of identifying what they desire them to be and then creating a life that reflects that.
Oh, that's really good. Are we talking lists here? Do we talk once a year at the anniversary dinner? When's a good time to talk about this stuff?
So for my husband and I, one thing that we do every anniversary dinner is we do a check-in. So that's our big check-in, but we're much more intentional as things come up to be like, hey, we really need to check in about this. Or if he has a goal, like right now we're looking at buying a house here in Germany. And so we have on a date night, which we're very intentional about, is, hey, we need to sit down and talk about what that looks like. What's the purpose? Why are we buying it? Is it for an investment property, right? All of these different things. But for us, like the big reflection and also celebration happens on our anniversary dinner. I think people just like, they go to dinner like because they're supposed to go to dinner, like, hey, yeah, we've been married for 15 years. Great. Awesome. Here's a little, chocolate cake with a candle in it and, blow it out and make a wish. But I think that there's really, I'm a very intentional person, obviously, as I keep talking about the word intention, but like making those moments and those opportunities intentional. So knowing that, hey, this is a time where this is a milestone. We are looking back on our past year. And I go through all of the spheres. What financially, how did we do? Did we meet our goals? Did we feel like we, spent our money well? Where it could be improved? Sexually, did you feel like, did I meet your sexual needs? Is there anything about your sexual needs that I'm not meeting? What could I do to meet those? Physical, right? We go through every single category and give each other permission to share and to listen, not get defensive, to really be like, I don't really know if I want to spend my money in real estate. I would rather do it here. Or, gosh, I don't really know if I want to have sex every day. Maybe I'm only wanting to have it once a week going forward. So often people don't have the freedom to have those conversations. So maybe making your anniversary a special time where it's it's a no judgment zone and see how that goes. But also it's so important to celebrate the things that you felt like you guys did really well that past year. So you know what? I was really proud of you for advocating for our daughter for her needs at school. That was really amazing that even if it was 6 months ago, you've done such a better job of speaking my love language and leaving me notes and filling my love bank or filling my cup. That made such a difference for me this past year. And so being able to say cheers, let's cheers every time that, you get 3 things to celebrate or you get to share maybe something that you're proud of that you did. Hey, you asked for me to cook dinner 3 nights a week. And I did, I'm really proud of myself for following through. So sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, it was good. I was going to keep you going on it.
Yeah.
Do you find it harder for men or women to do that? I do I'll speak personally here. We do the anniversary dinner. Mm-hmm. And then, there's a bit of how'd the last year go? What would you change? But I certainly don't go through, a list that you went through. And I'm not saying it's a list as in maybe it's written down.
No, sure.
But is it hard? If it's hard for people, they haven't been practicing it for 15 or 20 years, what's a good way to do it? Because I would imagine not only could it be awkward to talk about some of those things at dinner with other people around you, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Might be fun. I don't know. But it might be hard, especially if there are issues or problems that are more than a year old, especially when you start doing it. So is there a good approach, at least for the first time? Hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we do this time?
Yeah, I think proposing it just like that, hey, I was listening to a podcast or I was reading a book, or those are really great ways to introduce anything. That's kind of like a third party buffer of it's not your idea per se, but you've been you're sharing something that inspired you to want to make a difference. So I think hey, going forward, I think it'd be really fun if we celebrated 3 things that we felt like we each did well last year. I love how this expert or this author talked about it in the book and how it made their marriage stronger, I would really love to help make our marriage stronger. So you're giving a reason why you're doing it. You're proposing an improvement. And then you're also sharing like where it came from. So not all individuals need all three of those. For some couples, they're like, I don't care why where you got it. Like, sure, let's try it. Like, this will be fun. But for other couples, especially when they're set in their ways, sometimes they can be a little hesitant, and having all three of those aspects helps open their mind to doing something different. It will be awkward. Like, just like admit it and just like wade into the awkwardness. You know, I obviously my specialty is in sexuality. And so talking about sex for me is like, I can talk to anybody about it at any point of the day. And so I know that that's not normal. You know, I know that most people don't feel like they can like pass the butter, like, did you watch porn today? Or like, did you masturbate? Like, those are like normal conversations.
Right.
And so try to start small and know that it's going to be uncomfortable at first. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't want to tell you like, oh, it'll be fine, because they may not react the way that you want to. And then that may feel like rejection. So find something that will make you feel safe, or preempt it by saying, I want to share something with you. It's going to be probably really awkward because we're not typically talking about these things. And I want to change that, because I really think that this is an important thing to talk about openly in a really healthy marriage. Again, you're sharing why you want to have these conversations. And if people aren't used to that, knowing why can help them maybe ease into it.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier on in the show that normally people come to you when things are on fire, right? And that normally people don't come and say like, you know, everything's great, except for I'd really like him to, I don't know, take the trash out without being prompted. Like, I mean, like, it's not small stuff. So let's go with females first. When that fire, when it's there, what are the most common, in this stage of, hey, we've been married for a while and maybe the kids are gone, or they're in middle school, they're more independent, and this isn't going well. What are the female, I guess, complaints, observations, and then what are the male, or the more typical male, if complaints or observations?
He is emotionally unavailable. That is hands down what I see. Is that I have a lot of female clients who are like, I am trying to connect with my spouse, my partner, and I feel like I'm like pulling things out of him. He's just never developed an emotional intelligence and never developed that emotional toolbox. And because they were so busy with like kids and diapers and t-ball and, band concerts and stuff, that was okay. Like, they didn't need to, they did need to, but they were able to kind of like kick it down the road. And then now that we're in high school and like, my kids don't want to hang out with me. Like, no, they're like doing their own thing. And like, well, I guess I'm stuck with you. Like, you're not, like, I guess it's another night here with me and you. And they're like trying to have these emotional conversations. And it's like, they're meeting a wall. And so then they come and they're like, I'm feeling disconnected. I don't want to have sex with him. I don't want to like touch him. I don't like, this isn't fun. This isn't, and it's not romance per se. It's really, the word connection comes up so much for my female clients.
Okay. So as a guy, say emotional connection, what does that mean? Like, give me examples of what emotional connectivity means.
Vulnerability. So being able to come in and say, I'm really scared about my mom. Like, her health isn't doing very well. Instead of like, yeah, I think my mom was like in the hospital or something. And like, I don't know, I'm not really sure. I probably need to go and check on her. Like, it's almost like upper level versus like the surface level versus like what's really going on. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, are you scared that something, like, she's got her test results? Like, how do you feel about her test results? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, can't do anything about it. Sure. Right. But I'm asking you how you feel about it. Like, tell me what's going on. Like, are you scared? Like, what kind of pressure is that putting on you? Because then are you afraid that you're going to have to now be her caregiver because your dad's, not able to do that? And it's really about opening up that emotional box that's inside of every one of us. And for a lot of men, they haven't needed to, they haven't been raised that way. They don't have the practice. And so now that they're female partners, just because society in general tends to be talking more about feelings, and going to therapy is more normalized, and people are starting to, address unresolved traumas, or, these buzzwords that are going around, and listening to like personal development podcasts and really wanting to improve themselves. And I think when then they try to apply that to their own lives and in their own marriages, and they're hit with that wall because their partner, it usually may not be as on the same path as them, then they get frustrated and like, I'm trying to like get him to talk to me about how he's feeling about this, because they're there, those feelings are there, but he's just not willing to go down and do the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, it does. So what about on the male side? If the male is the one who is going, hey, listen, doesn't bring the what are the normal male complaints or observations about, in this case, their female partner or spouse?
I think one of the big things that comes, it's funny, connection also, but they can, it's almost like they can sense that their female partners have like disconnected. It's like this weird dance, like the woman's trying to connect with her husband, and he doesn't know how, or he's scared to, or lacks the tools. And so then he's kind of like stuck here. And then so she's frustrated and she'll pull away, and he feels that pulling away, but then he doesn't know how to reconcile it. So it's like this weird kind of dance. So I see the disconnect of almost like she doesn't want me in her life. Like she doesn't like a resentment, like they can feel the resentment. I have seen men like my male clients complain to me about the lack of physical affection and the lack of like sexual intimacy, because again, it's this, now I'm pulling away, not only emotionally, but also physically, like the female is. And that includes, right, withdrawing sex. And like he sees the physical way as a way to connect, but she doesn't want to connect physically because her emotional needs aren't getting met. And so then it's just kind of like this cycle.
How successful, and I'm not saying you, but if someone comes to you like this in the situation, 40s, 50s, 15, 20, 25 years in, what, how successful is it at that point? You said, they come to you with, it's already a dumpster fire. How successful is it in terms of, therapy working, making it work?
Sure. So one of the questions that first questions I always ask is how motivated are you on a scale of 0 to 10 to save this marriage? And I'm like, let me just tell you, I want you to be completely honest with me, because one, I can tell if you're lying because it will show up in your results, right? I always tell them, I don't care if you want to get divorced or you want to stay together. Like, you tell me what you want and we will figure it out, and we will come up with a game plan. I am 100% confident that I can help, quote, save a marriage. Like, I really am good at what I do. I cannot, though, work when one of the individuals is apathetic. So people always say that the opposite of love is hate, but I believe that the opposite of love is indifference. So if you have an individual that comes and says, I can't believe she's such a jerk, and like, he just never does blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, okay, I can work with this, right? I can work with this frustration because there's passion there, right? There's care. If I have somebody who's like, I don't really care. Like, if we have sex again, he can go do whatever, like, girl, have a good time. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I can't work with that. So that question on a 0 to 10 scale of your motivation, because I fully upfront, I said, if you want the easy way out, call the divorce lawyer. However, those problems that you're having in this relationship do not magically go away. They will manifest in other ways in other relationships. So I encourage you to do the work now, whether you decide to keep this relationship or not. But if you are not willing to do the work, you will not have success. If you continue to use the skills and tools that you're currently using now, you will not have success. And that's okay if you are like, I'm done, I'm tired. And I do. Sometimes I have couples who come to me and they're like, okay, what can we do? And I'm like, it's going to be a lot of work. It's like losing 100 pounds versus losing 20 pounds versus 5 pounds. You know, if I have like decades worth of issues to deal with, you know, work through with a couple, that's like trying to lose 100 pounds. Is it possible? Of course it is. Is it going to require a lot more time, money, energy, and effort? Yes, than losing 20 pounds. So anything is possible. I have seen incredible transformations. I've seen it's been amazing, but I'm not going to lie and say that it's not easy, that it's super easy and it's overnight.
How do you feel about separation?
I'm a big fan of it. I am not one of your traditional, I'm not a marriage and family therapist. Like I'm a trained mental health therapist, but my training wasn't there's different tracks you can do. So
yeah.
I think that sometimes time apart is a really good opportunity for individuals to heal, to work on their own things, and that they can come back together stronger. I think that there are boundaries required in separations, really, really good communication, really clear expectations. That is something I don't recommend doing on your own. I think anytime you are changing your relationship style or your relationship structure, that you need to incorporate a professional to help guide you through that.
How does menopause factor into this age and stage? Does it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely. Anytime you're dealing with hormonal changes, like I mean, it's not just a hormonal stage too. Like there's also the word grieving process comes up for me of like, my body was created, you know, to create and carry and sustain life. And when that is taken away from you, whether that's when you're 35 or 55, and not taken away, it's just like you enter into that process or that stage of life. It's like there can be a mourning for like what was, what wasn't. Maybe you never had children, but you wanted it. Now that's not even an option anymore in terms of biological, you know, seeing your body change and like seeing that real physical manifestation of it can be really triggering for a lot of women. And then again, you know, for some women, it's a years and years long process. And that can be really frustrating because they don't know their body anymore. And now they're adjusting to something new. And then they see their body differently. And then that affects like their self-worth and their self-esteem. And then that affects their relationship with their friends and their partners. And so, yes, I mean, it's a very affected or a very prominent, you know, life milestone that affects so many things. So,
then to continue that, what can, I guess, in a heterosexual relationship, what can women do or be cognizant or aware of while that process is happening? And what can their spouse or partner on the male side do along those same lines?
Yeah, one thing that have been impressed with recently is more men understanding how a female body works, understanding our menstrual cycles, understanding the menopause phase. For so many generations before, it was like, we're not touching that. We're not talking about that.
Right. The births happen in another room. You smoke a cigar in the waiting room, right? Versus now it's very involved or
right. It's hands-on. I'm a big fan of sharing your menstrual chart, if you cycle track with your partner. Like they should be aware of where you are in I'm serious, add it to your shared Google family calendar. Like it's like, I'm not kidding.
I don't know if I'd be a fan. I haven't really ever thought about it, but fan.
Yeah, but it's so
why do I want to know that, honestly?
Because the different phases affect a woman significantly. So like if she's in her follicular phase, most women are super, super horny in their follicular phases. And so like knowing that, like, okay, I'm going to get me some, like, I know that I need to, like, all I need to do is like, just give a little shoulder rub and right. And so I'm good. Or knowing that like she's a few days before when she's starting to menstruate. And like, that is when her hormone levels are at their lowest. She's probably going to be super moody. She's going to be on edge. She's going to be tired. She may like physically not feel well. So then I just maybe need to be less reactive to some of her comments, or just kind of be aware and try to be more supportive. So yeah, there's, even if you're not trying to conceive, being aware of where your partner is in their menstrual cycle I think it's a relationship game changer, honestly.
Well, now that you put it that way, it sounds like a pretty handy cheat sheet for guys.
It is a cheat sheet. I kid you not. It is, you know, and it's also important too, because we as women should be cycling about every 26 to 33 days, like depending. And so if you're like, you haven't had your period in like 2 months, like, and she's not perimenopausal, then like, hey, do you think like maybe you should go to your doctor about that? Or there's like other like side effects that you're noticing, like significant weight gain or significant weight loss, or like you're a team. And so caring about each other's mental and physical and sexual health and well-being is important. And so I think, again, just being aware, it's not that you have to like every day, like, oh my gosh, she's on day 15 or like whatever, like, just like, okay, like these are kind of like the general of things to expect. And I want to be a supportive partner, and knowing how my partner's body functions can be helpful in that. And same with menopause. So,
let's move to, and thank you for all of this.
You're welcome.
Let's move to like, let's go like 50s, 60s, 70s. So let's say there's a couple that have gotten, right, kids have flown the coop if they have them. They're in later stages of careers and later stages of life. What are the differences between that kind of, 40s, 50s existential crisis, or if that's too strong of a phrase, your midlife crisis, or just midlife, whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's a change. When you move into the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and let's just say even 70s, what are some of the differences or nuances that happen in those ages that are different than what we just talked about in kind of the 40s and 50s range?
One of the things that I've seen with individual, like with clients, and then also just in my own life with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, is there just seems to be an opportunity to be at such a peaceful stage in that phase of life. It's almost like a lot of them are at that retirement age. They're starting to connect with things that they actually enjoy doing. Gosh, I remember my grandma, she would golf and she would play bridge and she'd like go shopping with her friends and stuff. And then I talked to some of my friends who have, grandparents who are in their, 70s and 80s, and they just kind of sit at home and they don't do much and they're not very engaged. And I see the importance of community, but also one of the things that I see, especially with women, it's almost like when they hit their 70s and 80s, it's like their time to finally get to do what they want to do. And it's almost like they give themselves a permission slip to be like, okay, I'm going to go. Like my grandma, she was in her like early 70s, and her and her two girlfriends went to Europe on their own, like pre-cell phones. Just we're like, yeah, we're going to go for a month and we're just going to like, well, they didn't backpack around, but like kind of like tour around. And like she would have never done that when she was in her 50s or 40s or whatever, and it was really cool to see. Like, yeah, I've always wanted to go do that. I'm going to go do that. So that's one thing that I start to see. It's almost like they come to terms, or they have the opportunity to come to terms with that relationship with themselves, and really like, yeah, like I only have so much time left here. Like I really want to use that time wisely. I really want to like go and explore and try new things or try something different. And it's cool to see some people when they do. Obviously, that's not the case with everybody, but that's something that I see with older adults.
Are there any issues around, I kind of kick some of this off in decades or stages, right? Birth to death. There's a lot of them in between there. But retirement or slowing down work, moving to part-time work. one couple over the other. Maybe somebody early retires. Maybe somebody says, I'm never going to retire. You know, they turned 72 and they're like still going strong. And they're like, I can't sit there right on the porch and in a rocker. Yeah, I
Right.
want to go do a month in Europe, but after that, I want to get back to work. It's fulfilling.
Yeah.
Are there relationship and sexuality issues in those stages as well? Because that's retirement, early retirement, semi-working, and or not at all. Those are really big moves for couples who have kind of been in a pattern of marriage. Again, I'm being stereotypical here, but marriage, kids, right? School, and then, the 50s, 40s. Hey, do we still want to be together for the next 20, 30 years of our life? And if the answer is yes, there are still more hurdles and changes in that relationship. Can you talk about some of those and what if there's a different approach at those ages and stages, then would there be at a 20-year pause?
Yeah, absolutely. So like what you just said, so our brains like predictability and we don't like change. So if we have been in the habit of 30 years and one partner goes to work from 9 to 5 and comes home, and the other one maybe does a night shift or has only been working part-time, and now suddenly both partners are home full-time in each other's grill all the time, right? That is a change that we're just not used to. And so when you're considering going from part-time or full-time or whatever to any kind of major hour cut or any type of change that will significantly alter the way that things have been running in your household, it's important to have that conversation preemptively with your partner. Like, hey, I'm really realizing that I actually want to just retire. Like I'm done. I'm tired. I don't want to work out in corporate anymore. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your concerns? Like, yes, you've worked so hard. I think that's great. Like, okay, that means that I'm going to be home now all the time. How do you feel about that? And I think that can feel like a loaded question, because most people would be like, well, of course you would want your partner to say, oh my gosh, of course I want to spend all of my time with you. And yes, we're going to bake bread together, and we're going to garden together, and we're going to go do walks 3 times a day together. And it is okay to say that concerns me or that overwhelms me, because I'm so used to having 8, 10, 12 hours a day to do my own thing and to be by myself. I think it's good if we kind of have check-ins with each other or create a system or a schedule so that we're both having our needs met, but not in a way that feels inauthentic.
So you still need to plan, sit down, and talk about that next stage of your relationship and your marriage.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I think it's that societal assumption that we've been waiting, 50 years to be able to be at home and spend time with the person that we said I do to. And that's not the case for everybody. Some people really enjoy living apart, not necessarily physically living apart, but you do your thing, I do my thing, we come back together, right? It's what those priorities are. So again, something that we talked about before, what's the priority at this stage in our marriage? Is it exploring? Is it raising grandchildren? Is it volunteering? Is it learning a new skill? Is it only reconnecting? And if so, so one of the things I ask couples, regardless of how old they are, is, and especially if they're struggling sexually, is how often would you like to have sex a week or engage in sexual activities a week? And I have them write it down separately so that they don't well, he's going to want to have it every day, so I need to respond this way, and vice versa. And so it's the same thing in this stage of life. How many hours per day or how many activities per day would you like to spend with your spouse now that they are home from retirement? Yeah, I could do 3 hours a day. I could do a solid. Okay, so let's compare, right? How can we reconcile these two numbers so that they feel good to both individuals, and it reflects the priority of this stage of their relationship.
And in those stages, let's move to sex really quickly.
Sure.
I mean, I think there's this, I had a guest on one time, Joan Price, who said, over a certain age, there's this societal ick factor. She's like, and I reject that.
I do too.
And so and that's not only societal, but I can imagine with body changes and a lot more gray hair or less of it, there might be some own personal hangups or anything. How would you, when you move from, let's say, 50s into 60s and 70s, what are some healthy conversations, or I guess upfront conversations that couples don't have about sex and their sex lives, around themselves as a couple, or a body image, or how they feel, or even physical changes, obviously, when you're not 18 anymore and you're 68?
Yeah. I think, again, having those check-in conversations of like, hey, like, how are you feeling about our sex life? Like, how are you feeling? Like, do you feel like your sexual needs are being met in this relationship? Is there something that I could do? Or your physical, like I think when people hear the word sexual, they automatically think intercourse. And sexual is so much more than that. Like for some individuals, like just being held is meeting their sexual needs. For some individuals, like just making out is meeting their sexual needs. So it's really important to have these like conversations of like, are your sexual needs being met? And is that something that I can help with? Or is that something I can encourage you to have your needs met? Like, mobility. I was like availability. Mobility is something that starts to become compromised for a lot of adults as they age. And so they just physically may not be able to engage in a lot of the activities that they could when they were 25. And so you have to be creative. And so those don't need, just because their mobility changes doesn't mean their sexual needs change. But a lot of times we kind of are like, well, that's not a requirement. Like you're just being greedy, like that you need to have an orgasm, or you need to like, have somebody make out with you. Like no, those are a part of a lot of people's just innate desires to have human contact, to desire pleasure, And so again, it's, if you're not used to having that conversation, really start them when you're in your 40s or 30s, or like from day one. And so when you're 75, you're not like, do you really miss oral sex? Like, like that's going to probably,
I've never mentioned this before, but I think now's a good time.
I feel like we should bring it up after like 40 years of marriage. But honestly, do it. Like, who cares? Like, okay. Like, yes, it may feel silly and awkward, but like, like some amazing things can come from those conversations. So never assume that your partner is asexual or like not into sex just because they're 70 now or 75 or whatnot. I was watching Queen Charlotte. I don't know if you've seen that, but at the end, there's no spoilers, but at the end they're laying together and they're both in their like, I don't know, probably 70s, maybe. And they look at each other and they see, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. Like they see each other like when they were like 25, like, so we may physically see, your grandparents, but they may see each other still as like 22 years old. And so they still, want that love and care. And it's so beautiful. And I think that we forget that sometimes, that like those people inside of us still exist and still want love and desire and pleasure, and get it.
If it almost seems to me, just to me, you've got spaces in a marriage, and let's say a marriage is 50-year marriage. And we've all heard, the 7-year itch. We've heard, most divorces have within 3.
Right.
And I think we're becoming more aware of what we talked about in the first half of the show, which is, post kids, they're out of the house, they're getting their career, middle age, that sort of thing. And then I don't know, it seems as if we kind of almost fast forward to, if you get past that stage, then you almost fast forward into, the rest is bliss. Right. And but then here's this little thing over the last few years called gray divorce, which is, I guess, defined, 50, 55 plus 60, because the human's life expectancy, at least in the quote unquote modern world, has been inching up for decades. And so, people hit 60 or whatever, right? And they go, yeah, we've been married 30 some odd years, but I've got 20 more left, or 30 more left.
Yep.
has gray divorce always been there, or is it similar to this kind of 20-year itch, if you will, or 15-year itch?
Yeah.
And it's just becoming now more pronounced where one of the couple or both couples go, you know what, I don't want to spend my retirement years with this
Yeah.
person. Is that a theme you're seeing, or does it really even continue, beyond?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. So you had asked if it had always existed. I've seen almost like a silent divorce in a way for a lot of couples. So they may not fit like officially divorce at 55, 60, but they checked out of the marriage and they are just kind of like sailing along and like, well, we got like 15, 20 more years left. Like, just suck it up, I guess. Cause like, I'm financially dependent on this person and like I need somebody to take care of me. And right, because like health and like you said, people weren't living as long now as they are now. So I think that in a way that it has existed, but just not in the formality sense as it does now. So yes, I do see that gray divorce of, people like, yeah, dude, you're not wanting to like make any, and when I say dude, it could be dudette as well, but like,
Right.
You're not like wanting to, like, you've quote, let yourself go, or like, you don't care about the things that I care about anymore. And you're not willing to work on them. And I've tried to get you to work on them. And I'm looking at our, last 20, 25 years of good, solid, assuming health and mobility and stuff. And like, you're not a partner that I want to, pursue or proceed with. And so, yeah, it's a thing. Absolutely.
Where does counseling, sexual or otherwise, fit in this broad spectrum? Is there something to be said for proactive marriage? Okay, sorry. Yep, go.
100%. Yes, I think anytime that we can be self-aware and anytime that we can work on ourselves and like expand our toolbox to be better humans and better individuals, kinder, more patient, dealing with the hardships of life, that has a ripple effect. And unfortunately, it's like we would never ask that question about like getting your car an oil change. Like, do we have to change the oil of the car? Like, you don't have to, but if you want it to run, then yes, you will. Or it's the same thing. Like, we need preventative things. Like, yeah, you should probably get immunized. You should probably eat your vegetables. You should do a lot of these things to help set you up for success in the long term. Can you still like have a marriage, quote, survive? And I think that's one thing that I've started to evaluate silently, of course, because nobody wants to hear this, but like, I have friends whose grandparents are celebrating 50, well, I guess parents now, 50, 60 years together. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. You've been married for 50 years. And I'm like, but is it amazing? Like, do you enjoy being married? Like, so really thinking about like, what's a successful marriage? Because I think that historically we've seen people like make it 50, 70, whatever years. And we're like, that's a successful marriage. But I've seen marriages that have lasted that long and they resent each other. They argue all the time. They're miserable. Like, is that really how we define success? Like, if you just want me to make it to the finish line and check off 50 years, like I can do that, but I don't see that as successful. And so I think, coming back to your question about, the preemptive and stuff, that's how you make a successful relationship last. That's how you make it. It's not even about lasting. It's just about being successful in those moments because two individuals who are committed to themselves show up and want to invest in something greater than themselves.
Beautifully said. Last question.
Okay.
Let's say, we talked about grandparents and parents. Let's say we see something in our parents or in-laws or grandparents that, you're hanging around at a holiday and all of a sudden they're not getting along. Is it our role? Is it part of what we can do for our parents to ask some questions to, and again, a different generation. I think you said,
Yes.
and it is, right? The mental health care is definitely getting more normalized today than it was in the 90s or 80s or 70s, right? If you went, something was wrong with you.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that we could do or should do, softly, I would assume, gently, with our parents or our in-laws when we see things maybe not going so well in a marriage? Or is that out of bounds?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the relationship that you have, like prior to that situation. So if it's a very surface level conversation, like a relationship, pointing something like that out is going to feel really intimate and will almost feel like a boundary violation.
Okay.
Like how dare you bring that up? Like we've never discussed that. I tend to err on the side of overstepping. Like I'm not going to lie and be like, yes, I will make sure that it's appropriate. No, for me personally, individually, I would absolutely say something, but I'm also willing to be there for support. So one of the things that I think people forget is when you ask somebody a question like, hey, is everything okay with you and dad? Be prepared to receive that answer. And so for me, I am prepared to receive that answer. If they word vomit on you and they're like, oh my gosh, no, it's not. And I found out he cheated on me and blah, blah, blah. Like you have to be prepared to like support. It's unfair and it's unethical, I think, to be like, oh, actually, no, I actually really don't care. Like I was just more being polite. Right.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel comfortable, say, hey, I've noticed that there's been a lot of tension between you and dad. Like, I don't feel comfortable like talking to you about that. But, Bob and I, or Susie and I, have been seeing a therapist, and that's really helped us with our communication. So I find that people, when you share something vulnerable in you, especially about something that's pretty private, like marriage and parenting, they see that as a little mini inspiration, or even a big inspiration of like, oh, well, if so-and-so can go to therapy, like, oh, right. It's just like planting that seed. So it doesn't have to be like a full-on intervention. It could just be just like hey, mom, I love you, and maybe that's all you can do, is that you can't, they're not going to talk about it with you. You don't want them to talk about it with you, but you can just offer that love and support and just let them know that they're not alone. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan, like, just sliding that therapy card across, or like sending a like text message with like hey, this is somebody that I really enjoy talking to. Maybe you should check him out, like, or a book, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book that I did, is because not everybody's ready to talk about sex and vulnerable things with a professional, but they can start with a book, and they can start maybe with reading that book with a friend or with a partner and talking about the things in the book. And that can be like the baby step to get into something bigger.
That's great. Thanks for that, Courtney.
You're welcome. Yeah.
What questions about this subject should I have asked that I didn't?
Ooh. Gosh, no, you asked a lot of great questions. I don't think anything else. Yeah.
Well, all right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, maybe then I just have one more.
Sure.
The sex piece.
Yes.
The sex piece in particular in 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Mhm.
You said open communication a lot. And then you talked about, physical changes, right? Somebody let themselves go or anything like that. Specifically, not only about the relationship, which we spent a lot of time talking about, but how would someone, or what are those changes in those ages and phases, 50s, 60s, 70s, that are, I guess, physical in nature, or even desire might change? Like the hormones are going down. Maybe one partner's got more than the other. How to have those conversations, or how to approach those conversations after, years perhaps of a healthy sex life, and then something changes in those ages. How would someone approach that?
Yeah, I think especially if you're not comfortable just like owning the information, I always like to like accompanying it with research. So like, hey, I found out that my blood pressure medication causes erectile dysfunction, or can cause erectile dysfunction. If that's something that is a problem for you, or like it's something that bothers me, I'd like to talk to my doctor about getting a medicine that helps with erectile dysfunction. Or, hey, I was reading this blog and they were talking about how during menopause, vaginal lubrication becomes significantly less. They recommend using a lubricant during any type of sexual activity. I think we should get a lubricant. So instead of like, oh, I've been really dry lately, I think I should buy a lube, right? Like there's a different way of, it's the finding that buffer, that safety where you're kind of
third
like
party almost, right?
Yes, where you're protecting yourself, but you're also conveying the information that you need to with a purpose. So those are, obviously, menopause changes things, ailments change things. It takes longer to recover from like colds and sicknesses. If you have a hip replacement, like there's just a lot of that you just kind of have to be creative. And sometimes people just kind of give up because they're like, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort. But if they know that there's it's worth the investment, right? It's worth the effort that they're putting in because they want that connection, they want that orgasm, they want whatever, then they're going to put the work in. So I think if you don't want to be, sexually active, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have every right to be until your last breath. Like that is a part of how we've been designed. There's nothing wrong with that. It is beautiful regardless of your age, obviously after, puberty and consenting adults. But it's something that, again, to just be aware of that, how medications, surgeries, hormonal changes, those all have a significant effect on our mood, our physicality, our physiological responses, including our sexual responses.
Courtney, this has been really, really interesting, and I'm going to guess really helpful for a lot of people. Thank you very much.
So. Yeah, you're so welcome. And if anyone has any questions or they want to follow up or follow me on social media, they can reach out. I'm at Courtney Boyer Coaching on Instagram and LinkedIn and all of the places. So yeah, just a quick story. When I first got into this field, I remember hanging out with my grandma, who I was really close to. And I was like, Grams, you need to talk to your single friends because the highest rate of STIs are among, people over like 65 or something. I'm like, you make sure, no glove, no love. And she was like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to my friends about using condoms. And I was like, Grams, we care about them. We want them to be. So I love talking to older adults about sexual health and sexuality. It's something, again, I really think it is stigmatized and it shouldn't be. And so if any of your listeners, please have them reach out to me. I'd love to say hi.
I will, and I'll put all of your links and all of your websites
you.
and link to your book on the show page for sure. So if anybody didn't want to hit rewind a bunch on their podcast player, it's going to be all on the website. You can just click right there.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Courtney, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
The Matt Feret Show, related content, publications, and MF Media LLC is in no way associated, endorsed, or authorized by any governmental agency, including the Social Security Administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Matt Feret Show is in no way associated with, authorized, approved, endorsed, nor in any way affiliated with any company, trademark names, or other marks mentioned or referenced in or on The Matt Feret Show. Any such mention is for purpose of reference only. Any advice, generalized statistics, or opinions expressed are strictly those of the host and guests of The Matt Feret Show. Although every effort has been made to ensure the contents of The Matt Feret Show and related content are correct and complete, laws and regulations change quickly and often. The ideas and opinions expressed on The Matt Feret Show aren't meant to replace the sage advice of healthcare, insurance, financial planning, accounting, or legal professionals. You are responsible for your financial decisions. It is your sole responsibility to independently evaluate the accuracy, correctness, or completeness of the content, services, and products of, and associated with, The Matt Feret Show, MF Media LLC, and any related content or publications. The thoughts and opinions expressed on The Matt Feret Show are those of the host and The Matt Feret Show guests only, and are not the thoughts and opinions of any current or former employer of the host or guests of The Matt Feret Show, nor is The Matt Feret Show made by, on behalf of, or endorsed or approved by any current or former employer of the host or guests of The Matt Feret Show.